Okay.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome to True Politics. This is Peter Giblett, and I'm giving an introduction to Justin O'Donnell, who's the deputy leader and deputy leader of the Ontario Alliance. He's also the shadow minister and Democratic Reform and Constitutional Affairs spokesman. And as an Ontario Alliance candidate in the February 2025 election, he stood for the St. Catharines electoral district. And how many votes did you get, Justin?
I think I got somewhere close to around 50 or 52. I went up significantly from the last time I had ran in St. Catharines. So I don't have the exact votes on me. I mean, I didn't even learn about it until the day after the election. So it's, I mean.
Well, that was a snap election, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was a snap election, and it was highly controversial for a number of reasons. And I'm hoping to get into that tonight and talk about our party's perspective, how it affected our party, and not to mention the other parties, and ultimately what an Ontario Alliance government would do to bring in reforms to prevent such abuses.
Okay, so obviously the only person who was really prepared for that election back in February would have been Doug Ford himself. He'd probably had his party members plan for it for months. They'd already gotten their signatures done, their papers done, their signatures done, etc., etc. When they threw open the election, sorry, everybody else was unprepared for it, I think would be a fair state of affairs.
Well, it is. There were some, I would imagine, even in their own party who were caught off guard, and I'll get into that a little later, because there were some instances of deviations of what would normally happen in an election with candidates.
Okay, so give us a background leading up to the election.
Okay, the background leading up to the election, basically, Doug Ford, I suspect he wanted to have an election before the federal elections occurred. Reason being, he was concerned that if Pierre Poilievre, who was projected at that point in time to win the federal election, had been elected, what happens is normally if one party gets in federally, the opposing party gets in provincially.
Yeah.
And that was too much of a risk for Ford. So he decided, okay, we're going to, the official reason was because of what was going on in the United States with the tariff wars and stuff. He needed a new mandate, which I thought was just completely illegitimate. He already had a supermajority.
Well, exactly. At that particular time, he didn't need to set a mandate. He had until June of 2026 for an election to occur. He wasn't in any danger of losing any vote between now and then anyway.
No, absolutely not. No, it wasn't. But that was the excuse he gave, and this is where it starts to get very controversial because under current statute, under the Elections Ontario Act, there are fixed terms of 4 years, and you are not allowed, or the premier is not allowed to ask the lieutenant governor to dissolve the legislature unless there is a situation of a minority government defeat of the budget or defeat of major legislation, which would be considered the equivalent of a no confidence motion.
Yeah, exactly. So a typical parliamentary no confidence vote that we faced in the federal election a little while ago. that's exactly what the Liberals survived in the federal election a little while ago.
Yes, exactly. And those are the only circumstances under the act where an election could be called early. But Ford, in a highly controversial move, walked over to the lieutenant governor, and despite the lieutenant governor's office in Queens Park, and despite this law being on the books, asked that the lieutenant governor just go ahead and call one anyways. His contention was that convention was dominant, political convention. And I can tell you, speaking strictly as a legal professional, that is totally incorrect. If there is a conflict between political or legal convention and statute will always trump over convention at the end of the day. Let's face it, what Ford did was illegal and unconstitutional.
Okay, so you got strong feelings about that.
But I do. It was an affront to democracy.
Yeah. And let's look at the actual election and what happened.
Okay. I can break this down into a number of factors. First of all, from a logistical situation, Elections Ontario was caught off guard in that they were preparing or trying to prepare for an election that they were projected was going to be in March. Deciding to call it early in February was a major game changer, and not for the better for Elections Ontario. Now, some of the consequences that had happened as a result, first of all, there were a number of candidates from a number of parties who did not have time to set up proper candidate bank accounts. And some of these candidates had up to $20,000 in donations.
Yeah.
And Elections Ontario had to be lenient, even with the Ontario Alliance candidates as well, because myself, I admit, I did not have time to get a proper candidates' bank accounts set up. None of the candidates that we fielded did. I mean, this was an insane situation, and not to mention that this was the briefest election ever held in Ontario. I mean, there was no time to get anything done. There was no time for Elections Ontario to mobilize, or for that matter, in fairness to the other political parties as well. I mean, this was,
Yeah. I would think, though, that a major political party like the Conservatives, and each Conservative riding association would have their own bank accounts already set up, the same for NDP, et cetera.
You would, in a normal circumstance, if there was a fixed election date and you had time to prepare accordingly. But this just came out of nowhere. No one had time to prepare at all. I would even suspect some of the PC candidates were caught off guard with this as well. I mean, Ford clearly didn't do members of his own party any favors.
Okay. And, there's a lot of issues around that. And you talked about the constitutional legality of an early call. Any further on that?
Yes, there is. What I found interesting, and again, I'm speaking as a legal professional and somewhat an expert on constitutional law. This could have been avoided if the lieutenant governor had stood up to Ford and said, "No, I am not. Your request is denied. I will not. I will not grant you dissolution. You have an overwhelming majority, and there is no legitimate need to call an election at this time." And she could have used the King Byng precedent of 1926. What had happened was the Liberals were elected into a minority government. There had been some kind of scandal involving a government clerk, and the Conservatives that were being led by Arthur Meehan were planning to first introduce a motion of censure to then be followed by a motion of no confidence. King did not want the embarrassment of that, so he went to the Governor General at the time, Lord Byng, and asked for dissolution. He said, "No, we just had an election. And just because you're about to be personally embarrassed doesn't necessarily justify an election. Plus, it is possible that the no confidence vote goes forward. Mr. Meehan, who was the opposition leader at the time, he might be able to cobble up an alliance within the House of Commons and enjoy the confidence of the House without having to call an election. And this was considered highly controversial at the time because the Governor General at that point never ever refused the advice of their Prime Minister. So what had happened? Sorry.
So what if I'm hearing what you just said there? Essentially, he was prepared to put it over to an alliance of a minority party, a minority party and other parties in order to actually secure a government rather than go back.
He was willing to give them a chance. Well, this is where it gets kind of interesting. So what happened was King, after this, decided, okay, you know what? I am resigning as Prime Minister. We are going to go sit in opposition. Meehan was asked to form the government by Byng. Now, they had an interesting, I don't know if it was outright law or maybe convention at the time, was that if you were appointed to cabinet, you had to immediately resign your seat and run in a by-election in your own seat.
Okay.
In order to, I guess, to gain the confidence of the individuals or in their constituency, their approval that you sit in cabinet. Now, consequently, Meehan had to resign his seat, and as a result, when they realized that if the other proposed cabinet members had done that, King could have easily voted them out in a no confidence vote. So what Prime Minister Meehan did was he appointed a bunch of acting ministers who did not necessarily take the oath. And King, who was now leader of the opposition, seized on that and started demanding, look, take the oaths or resign. And as a result of that, and Meehan was frustrated because he had actually resigned his seat and he was stuck in the public gallery watching helplessly because Meehan was reputedly a very good debater, and it would have been interesting to hear his arguments, especially versus like a seasoned politician like Mackenzie King. But what had happened as a result, they were able to, King introduced a no confidence vote as leader of the opposition. It passed. A general election was held. The Liberals got back in with a majority.
Yeah, and that's probably one of those situations whereby the electorate kind of took control and said, no, we've got to have change here and we've got to get moving. You know, we need a functional government again. Exactly.
And, it's been debated amongst constitutional scholars, political scientists, historians, and lawyers. Was this an appropriate course of action? Now, by present day, they felt yes, technically Byng acted within his rights to do so, although there were serious political repercussions, but that really wasn't his concern at the end of the day as the representative or the vice regent of the of His Majesty at the time. He was above political considerations such as that his job was to enforce what he believed to be political or a constitutional convention. Okay. And so, but and they have. There have been one or two other instances where promises the lieutenant governors have used the King Byng crisis, the precedent, as grounds to basically refuse to grant assent to bills or to call an election. And it's also interesting to point out, little known fact, shortly after David Peterson was elected with a minority government in 1985, with the propping of the NDP being led by Bob Bray. His numbers were soaring publicly. So what happened, he made a secret visit to the then Lieutenant Governor, Lincoln Alexander, and he asked unofficially, if I were to come to you the next day or the day after and formally request dissolution, would you grant it? And Lieutenant Governor Alexander said, no. You enjoy confidence in the House right now. You are propped up by a party. There seems to be no divisions there, and you're getting things accomplished. You just had an election. Now, if a situation changes, if the NDP decides to withdraw support, or say you lose in a formal no confidence vote, or if the budget or another major piece of legislation gets defeated, we'll talk then. But no, I would not grant dissolution under those circumstances, and I think he would have been fully justified had this been put to the test.
Okay, so we had that situation a year ago, and but again, there's a difference between the election that Doug Ford called in the beginning of 25 and those other elections that you're referring to, because they were under old style laws whereby the definition of election period was the election date had occurred on such and such a date, and the new election would be called no later than 5 years hence.
That's right, because usually it was at the time it was you were elected for a maximum of 5 years. Traditionally, they would normally, if there was a majority government, they would usually call it after 4 years. Some governments would go with the full 5. Others, and again, David Peterson made his fateful move in 1990. He thought he could easily whip up another majority by calling an election after only 3 years into his mandate, and the rest is history. Look what happened.
And in the early 2000s, I believe it's McGuinty that actually introduced the Fixed Election Act, didn't he?
I believe so, yes, and and I think that was needed because there is potential for abuse. The sitting premier can call the election whenever they want. I mean, that gives an unfair advantage over the other opposition parties, and it gives incredible control and leeway for the sitting premier. They could just pretty much call an election whenever they think the polls are going to go in the party's favor.
Yeah, and those polls, I guess, well, all the parties look at the polls to see their fighting position in the polls, and in a fixed election type scenario, I would say that you're probably not even interested in the polls until you're getting close to the 4th year.
Yes, and you have to remember polls are basically snapshots in time. Yeah. And it's like former British Prime Minister Lord Harold Wilson once stated, "A week is a long time in politics."
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, in the current scenario where you would have had under the Fixed Election Act, what would have been happening is that the political action from the Liberals and the NDP in Ontario would have been ramping up during the course of the late 25 and early 26 in order to be ready for a June 26 election. So this election stalled all of that, didn't it?
Well, it didn't just stall it. It basically nuked everything for the opposition parties. I mean, stalling is like a gigantic understatement.
Arguably, neither the NDP nor the Liberals were actually even ready for an election.
No, I mean, no one was. Certainly, Ontario Alliance wasn't. We were caught off guard, as were a number of the other smaller parties. This was just such an unfair situation. It was just this was just insane.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, there are now proposed amendments to the Elections Ontario Act, which Doug Ford is saying that we need to get rid of fixed elections.
Yes, he wants to revert back to allowing elections to be called before the end of the 4-year mandate at the Premier's discretion. And again, I think if you've got a majority, there is really no earthly reason you should be seeking to call an election if you enjoy the confidence of the House, or in this case, the legislature.
Yeah.
That is just abuse of power. That is political opportunism.
Okay. And of course, this proposed amendment is really leaving it within, leaving the power to call an election purely in the, other than the 5-year ultimate term, it's purely in the hands of the Premier.
Yes, it is. And the Governor General would just rubber stamp it unless there were like extreme circumstances. Like the circumstances I pointed out were very rare. And, the lieutenant governors, not only just in Ontario, but in the other provinces, have had to show a great deal of discretion as to when to invoke a precedent like Byng versus King.
Okay.
Because there's also the flip side that as a vice regent and an appointed individual, he or she has no real right to deny an elected official who is the Premier the right to call an election.
Yeah, and I think that's that's problematic, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us, talking about yourself as being a shadow minister and deputy leader and shadow minister of Democratic Reform and Constitutional Affairs for the Ontario Alliance Party. So tell everybody how this impacts the Ontario Alliance and what you would propose as a better policy.
Okay, well, there are going to be other changes that are going to affect not only the Ontario Alliance, but other parties as well. Currently, in order to remain registered as a party in Ontario, especially during an election time, you only have to field 2 candidates provincially. Now, initially, there was talk of mandating 50 candidates for every party. Some had saw that as too extreme, so they finally went for basically you have to have 25. You have to field 25%, or basically what it would work out to is 20 candidates.
Okay.
In order to.
But how would that work?
It impacted smaller parties, well, especially in this election, because they were so caught off guard. I mean, there was no time to properly mobilize. There was no time to do, prospective candidate searches or hold proper nomination meetings, candidate vettings. There was no time to disseminate policy or get any kind of viable training, or for the candidates to learn what was going on in their own EDAs.
And what would happen about small regional parties?
Small regional parties like Ontario Alliance, we would be at risk if that kind of amendment went through. Reason being is, it's not impossible, and I'm with the data I've been discussing with our party leader Josh Erickson. We think we've got a very good chance of fielding 20, if not more, candidates. We're looking at even possibly maybe getting a candidate in, if not every single electoral district, then most. But others that are struggling, especially regional parties. What are you?
Yeah, something like Northern Ontario and Northern.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, they exist primarily. And it's their right. They want to represent a specific region of the province, much like the Bloc Québécois want to represent Quebec's interests and have no interest in obviously running candidates outside of Quebec. So that is going to impact, I think, very unfairly on a number of parties, and it's going to put a lot of strain on them.
And then you've got also smaller parties such as the Communist Party,
yes,
who have every right to stand, irrespective of how you may view their policies. That's immaterial. They have a right to stand as candidates, but they probably don't stand more than half a dozen candidates in any election anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's but like I was at an annual conference for Elections Ontario on Monday. I was in there in my capacity as deputy leader representing Ontario Alliance, and it was interesting because the chief electoral officer, he did come up with some valid points. Like personally, he thought like anyone can come up with two candidates for like I don't know, like say like a marijuana party or a Star Trek party or whatever. I mean, it would be very easy to pull off, and it could lead to illegitimate parties being formed and joke candidates, which would just be I mean, I'm all for democracy and the right to run, but I mean, take this seriously, for crying out loud. If you're running to pull a prank or something, or just running on
and that's exactly
just ridiculous platforms. I mean, like, you frankly have no business being in the race. That's
exactly why I suggested, for example, the Communist Party, whether you believe or not in their policy, they're serious about what they want to do.
They are, no, and they have a serious platform. I mean, I'm no communist, but they should be allowed the right to participate. But at the same time, the chief electoral officer, he made the somewhat valid point that you need to have more than just two candidates to be considered like a viable, credible party.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I mean, that's because we Ontario Alliance, we were lucky just to get 5 out this time. We were hoping to get out more, but the election just happened so quickly. It just overtook everyone.
Yeah.
We were lucky. The candidates who we did field, we were lucky to get our papers in on time, because there was a shortened nomination period as well. It was just well, I mean, you saw Peter, like Angela Brown, who ran in Niagara West, and myself, like we were scrambling to get signatures, down to the wire. It's we even took like half a day off from our Invictus legal firm just to do that. I mean, it's shows dedication on our parts of the party and stuff, that we'd be willing to shut down the firm for half a day just to do that. But this is a great firm, so it's
okay. Well, and I think also the one thing, irrespective of how you feel about them, those small parties bring a different perspective, and the fact that they, that you've got a party in, I don't know, in London, that is bringing up a specific London-based issue is vitally important.
It is, much like with the Northern Ontario Party. I mean, because Northern Ontario, they do have very special concerns and interests as well, and there are also parties that are running on specialized issues as well. Like the Green Party. I certainly have nothing against the environment being like a priority in terms of policy. And in fairness to them, they have managed to get a broad enough policy platform to include other measures. So yeah, it's I have no objection to like primarily themed policy themed parties. I mean, provided that they you at least have some other viable policy options for in this case non-environmental issues, because they're just as important and it adds more legitimacy to them in the end.
Well, and that is actually always the problem about singularly focused parties.
Yes, it is, and there is a perception. They're just wasting time and squandering resources and finances of Elections Ontario. Another amendment that they are looking at doing is right at present, candidates only have to be audited if they have generated more than $10,000 worth of campaign funds or donations. In the end, they're considering dropping it now to 5,000.
Okay, 10,000 in a for a ridings the size that we do in Ontario. It doesn't seem to me that 10,000 is actually a huge expenditure.
No, it doesn't, and I'm kind of perplexed as to why they feel they had to drop it down to $5,000 because it's just going to create more complications. Especially for parties that make just under 10,000 and stuff. I really don't see the point of that. I mean, like Ontario Alliance, we wouldn't have been affected. I mean, let's face it, hell, I mean, if we had made over $5,000 in contributions total, I mean, like, I'd be doing a Snoopy dance, but that wasn't the case. It's I guess with some of the larger parties, I don't know.
Well, obviously, with the larger parties, it's easier to get donations. Somebody like the Conservatives, NDP, or Liberals, well-known names, and often their candidates are very well-known names, not just the political party, but the whole thing. You've got people who stood time and time again who are easy to collect for.
That's true.
Right. Whereas the smaller parties, it's a challenge constantly.
It is. It is very much so. It does seem to be weighted in favor of the larger political parties. They've also come up with some other reforms. There were some suggestions. Like one of the problems that was pointed out was that they cannot, the chief electoral officer could not immediately appoint returning officers, because they had to be formally appointed by the lieutenant governor through warrant or commission or whatever. This just stalled everything. And one of the things that the chief electoral officer is recommending, and actually I think Ontario Alliance should support this, so we don't have a policy on it yet, but I will advocate for it, is that they should do away with the lieutenant governor process role in appointing them or issuing warrants or commissions or whatever, and they should allow the chief electoral officer to go and directly appoint individuals.
Okay.
On the spot, because that hampered. That was one of the problems. It did they had to go through stalling and whatnot. There were also problems. They didn't have enough time to get and properly train returning officers as well, and this ended very disastrously in certain areas as well. I mean, they only they were only able to hold, I think, 1 3 or 4 day training session, and they hadn't had all the returning officers for the electoral districts filled at that point. I mean, like, what kind of an election was this?
Yeah, and I think that actually shows some of the challenges of the 25 election. And probably Doug Ford would just say, shrug his shoulders and be saying, well, get on with it. We went through it, get beyond.
And we won. Do you not feel my joy?
Yeah, but again, it is the duty and right of all opposition parties, whether they have just -1 seat to the current government or 0 seats. It's the right of all opposition parties to actually put forward opposition to government policy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the way a parliamentary system functions. You have the government and you have opposition parties who are theoretically the government in waiting, there to rigorously question and scrutinize the actions of the sitting government, and also to offer policy alternatives of their own.
All right. It's been an interesting discussion, Justin. Any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? I would urge both members of my party and just any viewer in general pay very careful attention to some of the democratic reforms that are going to be coming up in the next little while, especially from the Ford government with regards to elections. Some of what he's proposing, like shortening nomination periods and whatnot. Also, a number of other things I find very disturbing, and I think as a citizen, you should find that disturbing as well, because democracy is something to me that is sacrosanct, and what we're seeing here, what we saw earlier this year was an abuse of the electoral process, a total misapplication, and I would say that some of Ford's proposals are just a further manipulation of the electoral process. And elections are held to try to come to a conclusion as to which party enjoys the most support in the legislature and among the public. Elections should not be weighted in favor of any one party, and they should not be manipulated to try to withhold or destroy the rights of opposing parties.
With that, I thank you, Justin, for your views, and I hope everybody pays attention to this, and maybe we can get some change in Parliament.
Okay, well, thank you for interviewing.